This is the Gomaluku podcast.
All right, can you see me okay there?
Perfectly.
My screen will be a little bit too small for me to see, so if I'm cross-eyed or doing weird things, I never see my face.
I have the same problem always. You know, it's always am I in the frame or am I doing crazy stuff? Doing weird stuff in the background like last time around?
Right. Well, I just changed so that you can get a little bit of my arrow. But this house is my roommate's house.
Okay.
And there's a lot of people for a little house.
Oh.
So we have to find corners and you know, I didn't want you to see the table and the curtains so that we can get some light. And I was like, okay, I'll sit on the official recording spot.
Yeah, is this your official recording Zoom
little corner?
Yeah, I know that feeling. Like it's
we have been creative, let me tell you.
Oh yeah, it is. And is it also that is everyone using the same Zoom spot? It's like you have to like.
No, but we have coincided on having meetings at the same time.
Right.
So one of us will either disappear to the bedroom and try to create something there on bed, on the bed, you know, and other times, you know, if Evie can do it, she'll go outside, you know, and hold it from there. So we have become very creative when it comes to our Zoom meetings and them coinciding.
Yeah, everybody, I know that everybody gets creative, and especially with this whole pandemic thing, is that
oh my gosh,
you know, we're trying to find our own nook, you know, a nook in the house, and that is my go-to spot for Zoom meetings. And you must have been, I don't know, like I think it's becoming a thing right now, death by Zoom. You first you had a death by PowerPoint, now you had death by Zoom.
Yeah, it's Zoom is the boss of us now.
I know.
I think. Like, let me tell you, yesterday was a day. I had so many meetings and all of them were important. And I was like, what do you do when you have so many, you know, and you know, you always miss out on one. But, you know, different organizations will schedule things accordingly, you know, according to their own schedules. And obviously when we do the things that we do, we end up having a lot of things on our plate and having to shuffle. So it's been interesting.
How do you prioritize? Did you just
life, right?
That's for certain. And how do you prioritize then? Because I'm like, you should see my calendar. It is like there's a lot of overlap. Obviously, I'm sure yours is too. Like, how do you prioritize?
Well, for example, right now we're working on. To me, it's about putting out fires. That's how it feels at times. You know, sometimes you have the flexibility of being able to speak with somebody, but you know, many of the other big meetings that we have coordinated by the UN, you know, we don't have flexibility there. So it's always trying to accommodate, you know, which one is the bigger fire right now, and that really calls for my presence, and then having to do it that way. And sometimes everything is important, Ghazali, and you know that, you know, you'll miss one. You know?
Yeah.
And also know sometimes we run out of one to connect to the next, you know, and so is not here. Well, they're at the meeting that I was at, you know, but y'all just ran out.
Yeah.
So there's many of us on the same boat, but I think we can empathize with other brothers and sisters that really feel the same way.
Oh, definitely. I keep asking people in the before this just is a pre-conversation. Obviously, this is not part of the whole podcast thing, but it just is me. This is my interest, and everyone that I get on the podcast, like how do you do it? And because I'm trying to figure out what is my, you know, well, how do I reprioritize my list? So I always ask that question to everyone, because we're all, like I said, we're all in the same boat. We I feel like we're monkeys going from tree branch to tree branch, you know, from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting.
I will give you an example. This morning, really early, obviously, to match the time with Africa, I had another meeting, right? But I care very much about this team because I'm the focal point as we're organizing the Second World Conference of Indigenous Women. And Africa is one of my regions. So it was, do I tend to the one that I have early on that has to do with this other thing that's really important? And I had to pretty much put that in the balance. And it was like, well, I know Africa's doing really good, you know, and they're getting it, and they're, you know, there's zero draft, you know, as we prepare, it's looking really good. So, you know, I forwent Africa this morning so that I could attend the other one.
Right.
So it comes to that, and where am I most needed at, and where can I have the biggest impact if it's one of these at the international level.
Right. So that is your filter that you go through, right? So that's all right.
That's how I have to do it.
What if you're gonna play this analogy out, you know, like this fire thing, like, so what can I put out with my fire hose, right? Yeah, it is. I don't know. It's that's one of the reasons why I'm so hoping that we can go back to like travel and everything else again, so that we're all at least in the same time zone.
Yeah.
It is great that you can do this from your own home. However, somebody will draw the short straw, you know, like, or it will be 4 a.m. for someone.
Yeah.
You know, and it's or like I've been at the receiving end many times actually, you know, at 4 a.m. meetings, like, okay, well, I do have to work still. But so like you try to figure it all out, and it's like putting out fires whilst also being a juggler, you know, like you try to like, all right,
yeah, exactly. And another thing that I have found is we need to take a look at where am I needed the most, right? Where can I really have an impact? Because to us, all our issues are important.
Right.
You know, depending on where we are, a particular issue will be more important for you and I as islanders, right? Climate change is huge for us. You know, what's happening with climate change and all these other things that impact our ways of life and our own lands and territories but it could be different things for different people.
Right.
And when we identify that, right? When we know where am I most beneficial, where do I have the biggest impact at? You know, my presence at this meeting will equate to what? Am I going to be a listener, which is really as important, but am I going to be able to speak and present or give some ideas or input to make a difference?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, to me, those are that's what we've had to do, many of us. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, I also think that we've come to realize the power and the need to do some of this work face to face.
Oh,
because
100%.
For example, with the COPs, Ghazali, we're not there to negotiate and go to our partners, you know, or our friendly states to do any advocacy. And so if before, and you and I that have been there, if things were difficult before and we never knew what meeting we would be able to attend, or as many times as, you know, we've experienced that we have been there in a room waiting for the meeting to begin. And after we've sat there for some time, the next thing you know, it's going to be close to us and we're asked to leave the room.
Yeah.
Right? So imagine, I see this even more so now.
Definitely.
It is easier to keep people away. And that's when I really was thinking, you know, our presence there during the COPs is so important. And I'm very grateful to our brothers and sisters that are at the PrEP Summit, you know, on food sovereignty. because
right now in Rome, right? Or not?
Yeah, it's going on. It's going on right now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
I see the need. It's become really real. This is not as some people may see it in almost like I want to do some of that, just because they see us go from place to place, but they don't realize the work involved.
Right.
Or the fact that we don't sleep, or like you and Danica. Remember, they just run the clock and in there all night long. And the same thing with Alta. So people have no idea of the type of work, right? And the things that we can do right at that moment. Those moments where we have to do an intervention and it's something that you were not planning to do that, but now you have to change it and you have to address it. Right. We're not having that opportunity now. And it concerns me when we are in spaces that we still don't have a big Indigenous participation as we wish we could have. So it's very worrisome to me.
Right. Man,
because,
this is so frustrating. I hear you. Yeah. Sorry, please continue. This is just me thinking out loud.
No, I see the need, and the way I see it is our presence is of the essence, and if it had been difficult when there's just a handful of us, as is our case with the chemical conventions, for example, with the comforts of the parties. Yeah. Imagine now. Yeah. Where, you can go to this side event and that side event or whatever, but, you cannot go to this one and you cannot go to that one.
Right.
So we're at the mercy. So we don't even have, the fraction of numbers.
No, which is our strength, actually, our presence in those meetings, as particularly for Indigenous peoples, right? There's a strength in number, not just in numbers, but a presence at first. Numbers comes in second, but
right.
But yeah, it is.
But it's getting our foot in the door.
Yeah, definitely. Our way of engaging with these countries, with these people on a human level, and just talking, and we're so dynamic, and yeah, seeing like different cops and like Indigenous peoples, we bring a whole different flavor to the table, a whole new atmosphere to the conversation, to a meeting, that other constituencies I've yet to see them do it. And it's not like, oh, look at us, how great we are as Indigenous peoples, but it is just a certain thing that we bring, and it is our strength, and in the same sense, it is also the weakness of people that do not like us, right? It is something that is plays to our strength, that they would love nothing more than to downplay that. And this whole virtual thing, it's virtual, so it has the illusion of participation.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it is all
great.
I
can mute you and I can keep you out,
right?
And not that we wouldn't face things like that face to face, but we have hallways, and there's things that we can do. Those silent actions that we do at the different arenas of the United Nations, whether in Europe or in New York.
Yeah, like Tai, if you and I were in negotiations or at a negotiation table, and let's say I'm a state representative and you're from the Indigenous side, 100% after a meeting, you would walk up to me and talk, and we would talk, and we would invite each other to coffee or whatever, and just have continue the dialogue. Now, like, once you log off, you log off.
Yeah.
And there's no follow-up. There's nothing that keeps that we can use to keep the dialogue going, and we all know, and people should all know that like the negotiations don't happen at the table, right? It is all in the corridors.
Exactly.
It's all in at dinners and at taking drinks, having drinks with one another. That's where it all happens. And
or after a side event.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
You know.
For example, and again, sometimes the states have representatives that really are not in touch with a lot of the things that their own countries do.
Yeah.
And what pops to mind immediately was we were at the COPs. You remember that the number? I can't remember. One of the COPs for the three.
Right.
And Rochelle, you and I were the representatives that year.
Oh, 2017.
Right.
Yeah.
And we showed as a side event, Circle of Poison. Right. There was a lot of people that I had gone to the Latin America and Caribbean group, and I had been given the opportunity to address the people before they met, because obviously after that it was like, well, thank you very much, and we're gonna close doors.
Right.
But I had an opportunity to address the people as an Indigenous person. And then obviously, as you say, in the corridors and whatever, and while we're having coffee or running for that cup of coffee in the morning or at night, you get to see these people. So I invited them to Circle of Poison. And I have to say, Ghazali, that when they started watching it, a lot of representatives had tears in their eyes. And then after that, they approached me. I didn't know that this was taking place, right? And this film that addresses the impacts of restricted or banned pesticides being used in developing countries, but usually manufactured and produced by developed countries that do not have those chemicals or pesticides registered for their own people.
Right.
Again, that human touch is put in the faces, put in the stories that I think it's of the essence. And unfortunately, the pandemic is blocking us from doing that type work that is so fundamental for the advancements of our rights.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why, let's see which ones. Biodiversity COP was moved to next year, so it's supposed to be held this year, but it's going to be moved again next year, and I think that's a good thing, because climate change COP is likely to be held this year, but I'm worried about that in terms of Indigenous participation. Being in the UK within Scotland, they're keeping us in the dark in a little bit in terms of, all right, who gets in, who can go in, who can go, who cannot go in. The numbers per delegation, because they don't want like in some ways, and I don't want to put on my tinfoil hat though, but in some ways, I'm like, yeah, this could really, they could use it as an excuse. All right, yeah, indigenous peoples, let's do 10 representatives or 10 organizations, one per organization, just to have the illusion of representation. That is not, and then that's what I'm afraid of. That will be somewhat become a reality by the end of this year, because they're still not telling everyone everything. We do have to register, because I believe we're all registered for the climate change COP, but there's not a lot of information going on. All right, yeah, is it actually going to be physical? Definitely not hybrid. I don't like hybrid. I think at least either or. Either go fully virtual, which wasn't really helpful during last subsidiary bodies. Oh man, all these.
It's in acronyms.
It's acronyms Olympics, the UN. This is what you call it, right? It is the acronym Olympics, and it definitely is like that. It is so many acronyms that is UNPFII.
But how about GEF now? GEF, it can be for the Generation Equity Forum, But there's other things that are also using the same initials. So when do you get where, you know, and how are we going to get fancy?
Right, because when you say GAF, my mind goes straight to what is it? Global Environment Facility, GAF. That's so.
No, but it's Generation Equity Forum. It's the other one. It's the most recent one, really. This is the one that. So you see, like, we're repeating letters now.
Yeah.
I think we need to go to double alphabet now.
at some point, somebody must say, like, all right, enough is enough. You know, like we had enough of these acronyms. Like, at some point, we all should have that. Like we reached the end of it. Like we've exhausted all the possible acronyms that even makes sense. GAF makes sense. You know, you can remember that, or UMPFII, MRIP. It has a ring to it, but
yeah,
some UN agencies,
even the one for climate change, that's just too many letters, you know. And it's just because we get used to singing that UNF, you know, CCC type of thing, but it's at the beginning, you know, you go UNFCC, you know. Yeah,
definitely. Like UNFCCC, you're always afraid that you mention one C too many or too few. Like and then it gets lost in translation, obviously. Like UNF what? UNF double C, UNF CC, and there's even one Caribbean organization actually, which calls itself, which is 5 C's. So how do you introduce yourself? It is CCCCC. Like, obviously, like you could definitely, like, it's a tongue twister for one, but yeah, all these acronyms, and it is.
Well, I have a brother Damon to thank for CADO. Simple, CADO.
Yeah.
You know, Caribbean Amerindian Development Organization. Mm-hmm. And that's simple enough, you know, we can do that one. But it's just when it gets so complicated and you try to say these things when you are teaching somebody that is not, and you know this, you know, the faces they make when we clarify, listen, these acronyms, you need to learn them, you know, and you're going to hear a lot of, you usually talk on that subject, you know, mm-hmm. and their faces is, oh my God, I remember myself. And I was like, how am I going to remember all these letters, you know?
How was your first? Oh, shoot. Like, it's we're already started the podcast. Like, it's usually I do a countdown, but it is like, because we're already going to the good stuff. All right, like, let's continue the conversation. But yes. Just tell me, when do you have a hot stop? Like, how long do you want to talk?
All right. Well, to me, I think it's important to mention what is happening right now as we just were. Mm-hmm. You know, the pandemic is doing a lot of, the pandemic to me, and I want to be very clear on this, and I hope that other brothers and sisters emulate this. Mm. We need to clarify the pandemic has not caused the issues that we're presenting. Mm. Because in some things it makes, you know, there have been that tone as if these issues came about because of the pandemic, but no, the issues have been magnified. You know, we have been speaking about the lack of medical services, you know, in remote areas or indigenous communities, right? And so that problem was there. If you had a health center or a clinic, you didn't have the staff. Or they didn't have the medication or the equipment that they needed, right? So all these things, I think that we have to be like very careful. Yes, the pandemic has done a lot of things, obviously a lot of harm. It has also exalted our traditional knowledge and indigenous knowledge when it comes to medicine and how important that exchange is. But it has also put out to the public in a shocking way that I think, you know, sometimes this could be shocking. And then
that can be shocking as well.
And we have some people that live this way thinking, you know, genocide ended several hundred years ago, not realizing that genocide has never stopped for indigenous peoples. That as we speak, as we're having this conversation, Ghazali, brothers and sisters are losing their lives.
Definitely.
You know, so it is important to just clarify. The pandemic has magnified the issues that we were already facing. And I think that statement, whether we are in a so-called developed country, and I must clarify, dear brother, there are communities in developed countries that are either under developing countries conditions or worse.
Oh, 100%.
Those things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
So it is really of the essence, you know, when you're islanders, you know, we the archipelago of Borikén, for example, you know, one of our island municipalities does not have a hospital. It was the little clinic they had was messed up with Hurricane Irma and Maria.
Yeah.
You know, we had a girl from our community that was very ill. There was no clinic. Then there's an issue with transportation from the island municipalities to the mainland. The child died. By the time she made it to the mainland, the child had passed away. And so we have this great elderly community, right? Because again, they call it the brain flight when we're speaking about, you know, younger generations that are educated leaving our islands because of lack of opportunities to make a life, you know, or even get a job. So these conditions are also happening in developed countries, you know, the lack of hospitals, people dying because they did not have the attendance. So imagine being in an island where you don't have the emergency medical team that you need, but in order for you to get it, you have to wait for a transportation that is not being provided responsibly by the state.
Yeah.
What do? Right? And I'm just giving you an example of Borikén as a colony of the United States. Right? So people look at us, oh yeah, you know, the Taíno and the Boricua people and the Puerto Rican people, you know, they're Americans, and they think that we're all celebrating, you know, a kumbaya or dancing bomba, and it's not like that for everyone, you know.
Yeah, because what a lot of people don't know, it is not so star-spangled awesome to be because Puerto Rico is like, it is not a fully fledged, like explain it to people that it's not actually state of the U.S.
Let me explain the unexplainable. Right? In 1952, you know, obviously, just so that our audience knows a little bit about what happened. Obviously, we were first invaded by the rule of Spain. What we understand now as Spain, obviously, it wasn't Spain at that time. And then in 1898, when Spain and the U.S. had their war, we were invaded by the U.S. in 1898. As a matter of fact, the invasion was on July 25th, 1898. So just a couple of days ago. The September 25th means a lot of things for our people. And so it was the invasion time, and as many other tragedies as well. But it also, in 1952, on September 25th, 1952, Puerto Rico became, listen to this, the Free Associated States of Puerto Rico. Now, talk about a triple oxymoron. Okay? We're not free, we're not independent. The U.S. decides everything that happens. We have a local government, but really it has been proven over and over, and now at the international arena as well, that the Puerto Rican people can say whatever they want. Congress of the United States has to say as to what happens to our people. If you are an American and you are a Puerto Rican living in the island, you cannot vote for president. So for those of you that are familiar with the Declaration of Independence of the United States, if you take a look at what the US was claiming from, complaining about to the king in England, is exactly the same things that they're doing to us, right? So it's not a state, it's not a state either, right? So remember, free associated state. We're not really associated. If I cannot make a decisions, what type of association do we have if you're the one telling me what to do? And attributing things that impact the economy of Puerto Rican people, and we have no say in that, as is the Act Jones, the Jones Act rather, the Jones Act, right? Where, and I think that relatives in the Pacific and Hawaii, for example, they also are impacted, and Guam and Marshall Islands, anything U.S. territory will be impacted by the fact that the Jones Act says, even if you have somebody that's coming, and I'll use again my example in Borikén, if you have somebody, a ship from Costa Rica, if they're coming to the U.S., right, they have to go by the Caribbean. Well, instead of us being able to get the merchandise right then and there directly from Costa Rica to Borikén, we cannot do that because that has been forbidden for territories, island territories. They only allow one stop in U.S. territory. So what ends up happening is that there went goodbye, the ship from Costa Rica made it to the state of Florida. They shifted the things, moved from one ship to the other, right, to an American merchant marine, and then, which is the most expensive one in the world, and our people, so that then they can go in an American ship to Borikén. Now look at the cost. The ones that are getting that cost are the people without any benefit. So you end up paying many times, what could cost you here in the States $2, you would be paying $6 in Borikén, the cheapest refrigerator that you could find, the kind that maybe became the new refrigerator for our grandparents, now is at a price that you're like, wait a second, in the States I can get 3 times that size for just a couple of $100 more. But that's not what's happening to our people. Same with cars and everything. So, the economic pressure that our people are enduring is something that also must be stated when we're speaking about Indigenous peoples. Because as some of the elders have said, welcome to the reservation. But because of colonization, because of the control that they have in our spaces, particularly in the Caribbean, and the whitewashing stories, right? Where being Indio is like, oh, everybody can call you Indio, as a Nick or Taíno, right? And they don't have a problem with those of us that are stereotypical, although it is known, right, that we come in all colors. Historically, I don't want people to think, oh, well, that's because they got mixed with white people. No, there were Taíno that were very white as well. So we have a mixture of the very chocolatey to the one that it's like the stereotypical to the one that is very fair skinned. And needless to say, because of that rhetoric, Ghazali, our people continue to hammer that invisibility. So yeah, they can call us the Nick as long as we don't claim we are. They don't have a problem recreating part of our dances, and ancestral knowledge or whatever, taking benefit of that, right? But they have a problem, and I'm talking about the system, when it comes to acknowledging the rights of Indigenous peoples. That's why many of us in the Caribbean have taken it upon ourselves, to promote the rights of the Declaration on anything and everything we do. And you know that I always say that anything we do at whatever level has to be tied to the Declaration. And so we're moving forward and trying to educate our people so that they understand our rights. And if the politicians do not understanding, that they also see that the US, right, adopted the Declaration, and that there's also a responsibility that comes with that. It's not just about signing it and then I'm gonna forget about it until we have to sign another one,
Right.
So, those things are really important, Ghazali. And the structural decay that we are experiencing in the Caribbean because of climate change, because, they have ignored the warnings of our peoples. People knew about, as islanders, and you may have experienced this as well in Maluku, right? Our people know their coast. Our people know what happens. Me as a diver, right? And as a mermaid, right? I was raised, I'm from the coast, right? I know what I saw and didn't see when I was growing up. And I've seen animals that don't belong to our waters. We have invasions of species. We have overgrowth of algae and we have lost like 11, if I'm recalling correctly, 11 manatees. That is horrible, Ghazali. That is horrible because the numbers were already low. And we have been on a campaign to try to really ensure the safety of these gentle animals, which is also a sacred animal for us as Taíno people, right? But just within a couple of weeks, we have lost like 11. So, the impact is just horrible. And there has to be responsibility, but we have to start from our own spaces. Yes, it's important that we do what we do at that level so that nobody can ever come to us and say, well, we gave them a space, but they didn't come, right? We are supposed to do whatever we have to do there, as we have been for many years. You grew up doing this, right? But then we must bring what agendas they're doing, hold them accountable. The sustainable development agendas, for example, need to be brought to our communities. They don't even know about that. The states don't do it. No. We have to make the state responsible, right? Yeah. We need to educate from the local to the state level and to the state as in governments at the international level. Yeah. They have responsibilities. It's not just about, and this was when you were speaking about effective participation, right? If you recall, years ago, sometimes we had the feeling or the perception, let me just be politically correct, right? Once in a while, I do.
No, please.
Effective participation, full and effective participation does not mean let's have all these relatives come with the beautiful regalias and colors and dances that are exotic. And after you see them culturally, and you took pictures with them, then that's their full and effective participation. No, we honor those that came before us when we're wearing our regalia in those spaces.
Right.
But we have a voice and it needs to be heard. Now we understand our rights.
Don't you feel like an Print Forum that they always put us in the General Assembly room on the first day. Like all these amazing photos and photo ops and everything else, and then the next couple of days, and they put us in conference room 4
to the kitchen.
But I always, not always. That's not the right way to say it. But should we be aware of? No, we should definitely be aware. What pops to mind when you talked about that? Everyone shows up in their indigenous regalia attire and and that which is not definitely not full and effective participation, but it almost sounds like 555 dial an elder, like all right, that's let's get these indigenous peoples in a photo and be done with it. That surely should not be like, and I think I'm glad that you raised it, because I don't want indigenous peoples to, I want indigenous people to look beyond the curtain, like, all right, what's actually going on? And again, not having this tinfoil head on, but it is actually being aware of, all right, it's all nice, to it all looks good on the first day in the General Assembly room, and this is just an example, right? But you do see it. You see it a lot. It's like, oh yes, because I remember as we were talking about COPs, COP 21, in Paris, and suddenly European parliamentarians want to have a meeting with indigenous peoples, and I remember that the caucus, all right, was all right, who's going from all regions? We need all 7 regions present, and obviously you always need to have 7 regions present. So all the regions, they delegated some people, but I think it was myself and Kenneth. We said, hold on, you guys, before we bend over backwards to make it to this meeting, to just look at, all right, what meeting is going on right now that we should be in, instead of like going into this meeting. And these are European parliamentarians. They like on the food chain, they're not as high up as you want it to be. And it was like the final 5 minutes of a Super Bowl, like all right, we need to make some big plays. Like, are we actually going to spend our time doing this? But then all the regions said, yeah, we should be doing it. However, you just know, all right, these people are on the other side of the table, and we're treating it as a advocacy and a diplomacy exercise, or not exercise, but as another opportunity to engage, right? But you just saw, like, all right, yeah, we're actually in this for the photo. So at the end, I think they were a little bit disappointed that most of us didn't wear our indigenous attire, like as if I walk every day in my indigenous
and
attire,
that's something else that we need to, like, really, that's why I wanted to stress, right, that when we are in our regalia, we're honoring our ancestors. We're very proud of the people that we are. And that cost the lives of many, right? So we do it even purposely when we walk into those spaces. But the truth of the matter is, people need to understand that indigenous peoples, what they're being taught, at least here in the Americas and the Caribbean, I have to say, no, not every North American Indian lives in a reservation, and no, it's not that they're having this great life, no taxes, and everybody has casinos and they're making mega bucks, right? When over 70% of the North American Indians are urban Indians. They're living in cities like you and I. They're not wearing their paint or their feathers or their regalia to go and work at the bank. Right.
They don't smudge every day to take the subway. No.
So, yeah. So needless to say, we also have to break stereotypes that have been made about us. Right. And it's almost as prolonging and perpetuating that mentality, that the second that the Indian does not wear their paint or cut their hair or is not wearing regalia, you became something else, but definitely no longer an Indian. So it's another form of genocide, right? That continues to be perpetuated in our spaces. And it is up to us to continue demanding our rights be upheld. Nobody gives us rights or take them away. Like the other day, I was at a meeting and somebody said, and then they're taking away our rights. No, they're violating our rights. They're ours. They're our rights.
Yeah.
You know, either you respect them or you violate them, but it's not taking away, you know, your rights.
No. Yeah. You remember that invitation that we received a couple of years ago? Was to an event. Please wear your indigenous attire. I'm like, I make this weird.
We make them look pretty.
You know, as if once we wear our indigenous attire, then our indigenousness comes to life. You know,
Yeah.
like we're actually pretty much.
And also that there are people that do it honestly because they respect us.
Oh, 100%.
There are a lot of
100%.
people that really see, you know, these exotic people, right? For us, when we're there, you know, it's connections. It's my brother. You know, I haven't seen you in a while. You know, many of us are like, we can't wait until, you know, this COVID thing is under control and we can go to the UN and see our brothers and sisters and hug. To us is reconnecting with family, because yes, we go there and we do a lot of work and maybe have very little sleep. And we do eat good though.
Your recipe at Scotty's, like, what is it? Eggs over easy.
Yeah.
What was it again?
Eggs over easy with ham, my fries, and my English muffin.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening or if you're watching, this is the Tai Pelli recipe at Scotty's Diner. I would say, like, yeah, it is.
They know exactly.
No, they know. Scotty knows. Like, as soon as you walk in, 100%, they're like, oh yeah, all right, let's do this eggs over easy, ham and everything else. Like, it's I'm glad that you touched upon it. That not obviously that we eat healthy, definitely, but that the work that we do. Because a lot of people don't know what's going on behind the scenes. They see a photo, they see a Facebook post, they see maybe a 3-minute statement, which in their minds sounds like, I don't know. You could be like, what they expect. Like, people have expectations. Like, all right, and these people, they go to the UN and they bang on the table and like, all right, this is our rights. And you as an activist, from a proud activist, a daughter of Borikén, Taíno daughter, explain like what your regular, how do you prepare for a meeting like the Perm Forum or a COP or whatever, and what do you do when you're at those meetings?
Well, I think it's important, and I'm glad also that you bring this behind the scenes subject. And you know why, Ghazali? Because a lot of people think these are people that just go there and take pictures. I have to say, there are a very small minority.
I'm so glad you said that.
Exactly that, okay?
Yeah.
They go there and whatever, but they're not advocating for anything. They want to take a picture with everybody and their brother, right? And then be able to say, I went to the UN or whatever, right? And here are my pictures to show it. But, you know, that's not the reality. You know, with many of us, what you're seeing is the ultimate moment where we connecting with our brothers and sisters. And like I say in Spanish, I said in Spanish because it sounds really powerful. La lucha es una. Right? The struggle is one, because it doesn't matter where we're from in the globe. You know, we really have the same struggles. You know, maybe they're just reshuffled as to what is the number one problem in Maluku versus what is in Borikén. But when we add them all together, it's really the same things. You know, we're all experiencing those same things. So in order to prepare, you know, and a lot of people, obviously, because of my own issues for many years, a lot of our relatives and connections, and even in my close family and in Tribal Link Foundation and others didn't know that I am a person with disabilities, right? And because I had to deal with that, you know, and the stereotype that comes with that, it was almost like, you know, if they see our brothers and sisters as in a wheelchair or blind, right? Or something physical that you cannot miss, right? That is also the concept of disability that people have. And there are many people like myself, and this is pretty much what really inspired me to like really come out of my shell, right? Because I didn't want to be measured by my disabilities. And that is something that I struggled for a long time, because obviously I'm very vocal, but I happen to be one of those persons that has several disabilities. It's just that you don't get to see them, all right? And so those are big challenges that we have. In order for me to feel as though I am prepared, right? I dedicate my time to studying. I advocate, I research, I do statistics, I look into the issues that are very profound to me, and I investigate it. You there?
Yep.
It's kind of freezing.
Yeah, it's
Can you hear me? Let me see. If you can hear me,
I can hear you. Yep.
Yeah. All right. No, it's my connection. It says your internet connection is unstable.
Oh.
But then again, I'm in the tail end of Indiana, So anyway, so that is one of the things, the elders say, you fight the fight from wherever you're at, right? So whether you are in the Netherlands and I'm in Indiana, but our heart is with, you with Maluku and all our relatives, and me with Borikén and all of our ancestral territories and other islands. I try to remain very connected to what is happening in the Caribbean, in the different areas, human rights, what's happening with our environment, what's happening with food sovereignty, what's happening with deforestation, what's happening with, the businesses that are coming in and continue to like do these crooked deals with the government. We're losing a lot of our land, the little land that our peoples have, and I'm not saying as Taíno peoples, okay? I'm saying in general, right? Continues to be taken away from the people, because really those elders that I was gonna say that always say, welcome to the reservation, meaning like the entire archipelago and Caribbean is a reservation, right? And it's masked with that American and that whitewash mentality, right? It takes away the fact that the things that we endure are the same things, as an island as a whole, not just Taíno people, are the same things that everybody else is struggling with, right? And everybody else meaning indigenous peoples. So needless to say, I think that connection and understanding what is happening, first of all, with our homelands, right? And who is doing what. For example, our sacred sites have been destroyed. They're taking away artifacts, human remains disrespected, and even though we speak with whomever and write letters and do all kinds of things, the behavior has not stopped. So I first of all like to see what's happening home. And to me, home is not just Borikén, right? But it will be our ancestral territory. And when we start fragmenting our ancestral territories and thinking, well, Borikén, because Borikén, Puerto Rico, right? And we're different from Jamaica, and we're different from Dominican Republic and Haiti, and we're different from Cuba, right? What people are not understanding is that they're fragmenting us as an indigenous peoples, because it's known that the entire Caribbean and the tip of Florida, southern tip of Florida, is part of our ancestral territory. And the other thing is that people usually, Ghazali, think of international borders when it comes to the US as, well, US and Mexico and US and Canada. not understanding that we as Taíno peoples are also impacted by international borders. Our brothers from Cuba cannot come to Borikén.
Yeah.
And same for other islands. It's not just, let me hop over there because it's our territory. Doesn't happen that way. So besides doing my own homework on what is happening in our territories, then I take a look at that network that we start creating throughout the years, brothers and sisters. And then what can we do together? Who else is fighting my fight? And creating alliances. I don't know if you remember years ago, Berenice and I were fighting against the incinerators,
Yeah, please explain that as well, if you can.
Because we were having the same issue, right? We brought it up at the international level, but in joint statements, and the same thing with the ashes, for example, the toxic coal ashes, So it's important that we see what is happening in our spaces and then also see what is happening someplace else, right? And if you can form alliances and create networks, it is great. If not, I think it's important that people realize how many and what places are facing the same thing, that I can try to connect with those, right? So we may not always have the people within our network, but we can also find out, right? And strengthen our position when we are intervening at the UN level, whether it's the permanent forum or any other mechanism, right? And then we also continue working collaboratively with our own communities. So by the time I get there, I know who's doing what, right? And what issues what are those common denominators? So it's not just one thing of, well, time to go and teach Project Access and then go and prepare our team, which we always are very proud of Project Access, and have them go there and fight in the belly of the beast, as a very wise brother of mine once called it. So it is to me it is constant. It doesn't pop up just because we're going to have those weeks at the UN, and I don't think that we can afford to not do our homework and be kept abreast of what is happening with our brothers and sisters. Obviously, we all start defending our own rights, sometimes we start out of our own rebellion, right? In my case, I mean, you guys have the benefit of internet and all these new technologies, etc. But back then, it was based on being lone voices in the desert, where you didn't know that there were other people doing exactly the same thing that you were doing. Particularly as Taíno people or people that have been displaced from their lands, we're spread like seeds all over the place. So we may find ourselves in remote areas, states that, I was living at the tip end of Massachusetts, and line with New Hampshire. And I would go and speak about my people, but it all started because why are they doing this? Why are they saying that we do not exist? But then here I have grown with this family. My family, we're very stereotypical. So why do they say that we don't exist? Right? And why is that perpetuated? And then why do we have to hush? Right? When I asked my grandmother that raised me, Abuelita, why am I brown? Because I had other cousins, and some of them were like really, really light skin, right? And Abuelita grabbed me from the little store that we used to have in our parish and went through the kitchen. We went to the bathroom. She closed the door just so that she could extend her arm and show me her fist and put it next to mine and say, because you are like me. So you see, my fuel was based on what I saw happen to my own abuelitos that raised me. My great grandmother had the blessing of having her in my life, you know, and how proud she was of who we were, right? But I also saw almost that shame that my own grandmother that raised me have felt because of her Indianness, right? And the others clinging onto, you know, I'm lighter skinned, so you know, I'm more European than the other. And so things like that really did a number in the psyche of our people. And I know that we're not alone, right? So now we have the tools. But back then, it wasn't until the internet came about that we started learning. Like, I was like, oh, wait a second, there's other people like me teaching also in different places, right? So now we have these tools, and to me, they're of the essence, because it gives us an opportunity to use this mechanism. I'm referring to computers and access and internet and Zooms and these things as a great tool for us to strengthen our networks, to establish new relationships, to look for, again, having that exchange of knowledge. What is working in Maluku for this? You know, we're islanders. Maybe there's something that you are having in Maluku that, you know, you're in the Pacific, I'm in the Caribbean, right? Maybe there's something that is happening there that is innovative that could also help our people, right? Maybe that's Australia that's doing it, right? But if we establish these connections and take advantage when we have the face-to-face, you know, these are the things to be fostered besides going and doing your political presentation and all your diplomacy and all the things that we need to abide by. Yes, that work is really important. But the opportunity to connect and to learn about all these other things that many times people do not go into these spaces that are available, right? Because they don't know. I'm telling you, I had a mother that had a situation in Borikén. Her daughter is a person with disabilities, right? And you know that we have the Convention for the Elimination of Discrimination on peoples with disabilities, right? So I used that so that she could bring it, you know, when her kid had been like a month and a half without being able to start school, when the treaty says that children that have disabilities need to start just like every other kid. What things you do to make sure that that kid gets their education, you have to figure it out, but they all start at the same time, right? So people don't know things like that, Ghazali. So these are the windows that we have, and then if we learn them and we didn't know about them, teach them forward.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, because I've been thinking about this for a very long time, and I think about the usage of online, especially during the pandemic. If ever there was a time to connect Indigenous peoples with one another, to stay in touch, or create some kind of platform, whatever. This was the time to really start, because it is in a way everyone was at home. Nobody was traveling, and now the world is slowly opening up again, and people are traveling, and which is good, which is fine. Like I'm very much looking forward to doing all that again. But the thing is that what I was hoping that would happen a lot more were, because we only had Indigenous peoples when we started talking before the Purim Forum was scheduled, right? You know, and then before everybody comes out of hibernation, you know, and or Geneva, everybody, and then after the Purim Forum, and it dies off, and then you know, and it's peaks, and I I was hoping to see, all right, let's build a constant level of engagement, that we're talking to one another, that we at least can come out stronger out of this whole pandemic thing, out of all this whole situation. And I'm glad that you touched upon that there's so many opportunities out there that we definitely need to. Right now, as Indigenous peoples, we're no longer at the mercy of CNN, MSNBC, Huffington Post, New York Times. You can do it yourself. You can definitely do it yourself. So, and I was thinking about this, and I'm actually not only thinking, I'm in the early stages of actually doing it. I want us Indigenous peoples have like a monthly, like a conversation, about like a meeting on building towards something. And what else is a better way than to talk about self-determination? And I'd like us to all to explore self-determination, to talk about it. And all right, what is, I like a lot of people to learn about the Taíno people. I like a lot of people to learn about the nation of Hawaii, what they're doing, and or other organizations in Hawaii or around the world. There's an abundance, and you're one of the first people that actually used the word abundance within the UN context, and I love you for that, for many other reasons as well. But there's an abundance of knowledge out there that you talk about, and we just need to make those connections, right? And I think if ever there was a time to, I'm not saying that the time is over, but like it is, that it is right now actually to do it.
But I think, and let's go on back on memory lane.
Please.
Remember when we used to, and this has been something from the very get-go, even when I was doing things behind the scenes, before I went physically to the UN. It was
you
always
did behind the scenes too? Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of that as well.
Okay.
The one thing that we always had as the hope, right, was, and I know that that we've spoken about this many times with Damon and some of our other brothers and sisters, and Pam, which is like, again, she continues to be a light in the lives of many of us.
Still.
It had to do with the fact that we wanted to see, just like there's a UN permanent forum, if we could only do it on our own, if we could only have these opportunities on our own, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we're there, Ghazali, that what you're saying, right? Again, using the technologies, and I know a lot of our elders for a long time had resistance to technology. And that's why the intergenerational dialogue is so important. Because I think that, as you were saying, and you're talking about this, once a month. Well, that's exactly what we were hoping to envision, to connect with brothers and sisters.
Right.
How do we get together? And now we have an opportunity to talk to our brothers and sisters, right? And we don't have to get on a plane to share about things that are important to us as a peoples.
On our own terms.
Exactly. What's important to us.
Right.
Right? And how do we empower one another to make those things happen?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that we have an opportunity. I also see what you're saying, but it's almost as if it's manifesting, and it's on its path to full manifestation, but it's just a little bit different than what we had envisioned it, right? We were thinking of that, just like we're gathered here, if we only had a space and it was just Indigenous peoples and we could get all these funds for people to be able to come from all these different places. Well, now it may just be a subscription to Zoom.
Right.
You know, and some of our relatives that are in remote areas, because we cannot forget about the digital divide. And we need to continue stressing with those companies that are making mega bucks with technology without our permission, like putting things outside, you know, our globe. Because you have a lot of money, but you didn't ask me if I wanted to see your satellites as opposed to the stars at night.
Right.
We need to ask these people. You know, you need to make things happen also. You have a responsibility with humanity. Right? You're going to use our environment. You are doing your things. You create exceptions when things are harmful, but then you go behind closed doors, the meetings that you and I cannot go into, right? Or the meetings that all of a sudden somebody else is going to invite you for a Photoshop when those last 5 minutes of the Super Bowl are taking place, right? So I think that we also need to go. I know that Microsoft in the past, right, had gone there with our sister Michaela, Jade, and they presented things to us, but we need a lot more because of the digital divide. A lot of our relatives were totally incommunicated during this pandemic. Yeah. You know, and I think that we can say, listen, you're making this. Well, what are you going to do for Indigenous communities? You know, this is what we need. And then we need to work on things like that and be well versed on what our rights are. And always think not just about the kumbaya, but also how could this work for in a negative way, right? What else? Because we need to look at all the options before we engage others, right? And we need to be a step up. You know, we need to have that one up. Yeah. So that they don't think that they're just again the people that wear feathers and paint and you know love to dance. And sing. No, it has to be a little bit more than that. But I think it's necessary. I think we're getting there because one of the things that I, you know, with the pandemic and everything, I have to say, Ghazali, we all knew that Zoom existed, but that tool was there, right? And it almost it almost reminds me of this words of wisdom that the master that I like to learn from says, you know, Zoom was there all along. It wasn't that the pandemic created a Zoom. Zoom was there. And it's just like that box of matches. It has the matches and it has the side for you to strike. But until you take that match and actually make the action to strike the side of the box, the fire will not manifest, right? So I think it is like that too. We had the tool, and it wasn't until we were like this, the situation kind of forced us into that, right? But now, as we were speaking when we first started talking, right? We're all used to it, and we have 10 million, I like to use the number 10 million, 10 million Zooms a week. You know, you should have seen like last month's calendar. It was like, you know, I tell my roommate, you know, everything that I put on highlight with pink, you know, it's a Zoom meeting, right? You should see my calendar. It's all pink.
It's all pink.
So needless to say, you know, then we have the young people that are great at the technology. And you have others that can teach, you know, and you know, like myself, I'm a candidate, right? I'm not super well versed on all the gadgets and things and whatever. You should have seen me when you asked me if you know, if I had headphones and whatever. I'm thinking, okay, that's the headset that I had is in my storage in Florida. Now, how do I know if the little gadget is going to fit on this laptop if I go and rush and get a headset? I don't have that knowledge. I'm a writer. I can write, right? I'm a speaker. I'm a researcher. That I can do. Right. If it exists and somebody decided to connect it to the internet, I will find it. However, you know, and do you know that now you can do this? And I still don't understand the gigabytes and the gigabytes and I don't know any of those things, right? But the younger people do. Yeah. So if we exchange, right, if we have that intergenerational dialogue, you can have a young person, in communities that are at risk, working together to preserve their traditional knowledge, their language, their medicines, their ways of being. There's so many innovative ways of doing things, and at the same time, understanding what that symbolizes, right? Then got for Michaela Jade, our sister. She came to open our eyes to everything that is out there, right? That we were totally blind. We didn't know. I remember when she showed me that, and she showed me this, her, Angela, and Angie, remember Angie from Australia?
Yeah.
Had entered the hotel 16 times.
Yeah.
And that was an eye opener.
Yeah.
Like we didn't know things like that. But now, that's why I keep on saying that the intergenerational dialogue needs to happen, Ghazali. We need to, it's a must.
Right.
There's so much to us with climate change, the food, I won't even go there right now because then I'll get on a high horse, and the things that are happening with food right now.
Well, what's going on with food then? Well, what is...
You want me to go there, huh?
I want you to go wherever you want to go.
Okay. For a few years, I used to have this, like the good faith feeling, right? That they're trying to do us right. And I felt like that with UNFAO. Okay, the Food Agricultural Organization.
Yeah.
And IFAD, like these organizations, international organizations that were trying to, include us as indigenous peoples, like I saw that the first ones that really tried to do something had to do with FAO and these type like organizations within the international system. And obviously that was very good. And I would look forward to their reports, at the forum, and, they're doing good. They're including us, they're trying, and the voluntary guidelines and all these other things that were happening. And then obviously, how I have been very active when it comes to, the GMO companies and what that brings about and everything, particularly because in my islands, we have been, I hate to use the word victims. So we have been survivors of Monsanto and all these other companies that have experimented in our lands and continue to this day. And so because of that connection, last year, during the pandemic and whatever, and obviously something that's really important for everyone, always check your international news, identify your sources, and always dig into what's happening in the world.
Definitely.
And I see the announcement that you and FAO and Crop Life had formed some type of partnership. I wanted to die. Why? Because Crop Life is an umbrella corporation entity that represents dozens and dozens of the biggest GMO companies in the world.
Right.
And now they're going to have this partnership with UNFAO. That was very alarming. And immediately, obviously, the advocacy that we do through our international organization. And immediately, I listen, this just happened. This is dangerous, right? And needless to say, in the meantime, other regional and international organizations and peoples per se obviously realize what that is what that could represent to us, right? As we know, the GMO companies always want to sell you this idea that you're going to produce this much food and, you know, we're going to fight together, world hunger and whatever. Well, we know the truth about those claims. And to see that the global organization, as is UN Food and Agriculture Organization, UN FAO, to have an alliance with CropLife. And even though, you know, like we and when I say we, in that particular case, I'm saying from the International Indian Treaty Council, you know, we wrote to UN FAO expressing our concerns. La Red Latinoamericana on pesticides and whatever also did a big campaign, you know, and collected a lot of signatures from many organizations. And although FAO is kind of like, well, it's not that they're gonna boss us around, right? They didn't use those words, but that's what it meant. You know, and kind of like alleviate a little bit of the itch, you know, put out a little bit of that fire. To us, it's very concerning. Just to give you an example, Ghazali, during one of our regional meetings, one of our sisters from FILAC, right, and that is El Foro Indígena de Latinoamérica y el Caribe, the Indigenous Forum for Latin America and the Caribbean, fund, Indigenous Fund. They, Dr. Myrna Cunningham expressed that we knew at the beginning of last year, and again, because of COVID, a lot of these things did not make it to the news, right? That there was going to be a higher level of hunger in the world, right? That we learned about that at the beginning of 2020, right? End of 2019, beginning of 2020, we already know that they're projecting that, and this is before knowing that we were going to have a pandemic and the variations that have come about afterwards. But the numbers now, listen to this, 800 million people are suffering from hunger. That represents 118 million more than 2019. So where are we going with these SDGs? Can we just blame the pandemic? No. The numbers were already being impacted, right? And it's grave to see that as opposed to going down on our hunger numbers, hunger in the world, that we're increasing. 118 million people, it's a big number above the previous year, you know? So things like that are very concerning, and I think that all indigenous peoples of the world need to keep an eye and be very, very close monitoring any activity that infiltrates GMO companies into our food system, you know? And so it's to this day, it's concerning to me. And especially when I heard those statistics, concerns me even more.
Right.
And all the other elements that we have.
Yeah. Oh, please continue. Yeah.
No, you can tell me, because I was gonna mention something and I lost my train of thought, and I want to make sure that I get back to it when it comes back.
There's the one stat that I've heard was that that the US is letting way more chemicals into their foods than other countries, many of other countries combined. And it is, I don't know, it is, I'm just listening to you, hearing you talk about also knowing that the Food Security Summit is the pre summit is going on right now. And yeah, I was listening into some regional consultations that were happening, and I participated in a Pacific one. And sometimes I wonder, do indigenous peoples, first of all, sorry, there's a lot of things going on right now. First of all, there was not a lot of, I was expecting more people to participate in these consultations. It's about food. It's not even about rights, oceans, or whatever. It's about food. And only a handful of indigenous peoples were participating. So that was mind-boggling to me. And then I looked into, right, what is the Food Security Summit? What is it geared towards? All right, momentum towards SDG, what? On food. Is it 1, 2, 3? I don't know. Looked into that. And then and I'm just, are we, sometimes I get the feeling that that indigenous peoples have a lack a certain type of attention span or stamina, as in, like, all right, I can only focus on Geneva, New York, human rights, but that's it. Like, I can't focus on maybe climate change or maybe biodiversity, but not everything. Whereas if our mentality is holistic, and not everything is related to one another, everything is interrelated, dependent, definitely food is part of it. And definitely when you talk about sustenance, definitely food is part of it. And it's basically what it's turning into right now is that food is going to be, like you said, it's all modified right now, because to tackle the hunger that is looming, but the only way that you tackle it is by GMOs, but by how can I produce as much food. The question is, like, what is food according to them? Like, nutrition, sustenance, like what is, because I saw a report the other day, was that and I got the feeling that the definition of food is being downscaled in a bit. That it is so the slippery slope is so ongoing.
We have a Taíno brother in the Dominican Republic. Kudos to our brother Herman Perez. And he's an excellent painter, and very appreciated by his people, and obviously we're very proud of him. And he said to me that one time his doctor said, they were talking about, weight and whatever, and lose this and that, right? And the doctor said to him, the problem is not the food you eat, is the fact that you are eating food-like products.
Yeah, that's it.
And that stayed in my mind, right? So maybe that's one of the questions that we need to ask ourselves individually. Am I eating food, or am I eating food-like products?
Right, and food-like products are also so cheap as chips, and healthy food is nowadays like terribly expensive. Why? God knows why, but it is. Yeah, I think that is. It looks like that's where we're going. A food-like products is one of. I heard some. I think either I said it or some. I heard it at the consultation, is that they were going towards. By the way, this is something that I'm really afraid of. A database. They're creating a food database, which is like a seed database, right? What they're creating, and so they're which is I don't know, part of the SDG, like, I don't know, yeah, I don't want to talk about, I do want to talk about it, but then I should definitely like learn, read more into it, to actually make sense. But that's my biggest, in terms of what you said before, Tai, is like knowing what's going on all around the world. This is what's going on. This is what I can see from several, being in several processes within the UN, and that there's some kind of a push for creating online databases of indigenous knowledge.
Right.
We managed to dial it down in climate change. It's coming up in the WTO. It's coming up in water-based conventions. So seabed mining, convention law to sea, they're talking about it. So because indigenous knowledge is closely linked to marine genetic resources. So there's super interested in that. So like databases, patents, it's like a whole new economy that is emerging right now that I'm afraid of, that we're not aware of.
And those things are very concerning. That's why I said, when we think of the technology and using the technology, we also have to think about, how could it go wrong, right? What can happen if this information is utilized in a fashion that is detrimental to us, right? And we know that, for example, and I'll speak from my region, Latin America and the Caribbean, one of the things that our people are doing is promoting their own bank seeds, seed banks rather, right? And these things are the treasure of the future, because the more corporations infiltrate our food systems, our original foods, right, will be compromised.
Right.
And that the second you speak about compromising the seeds, then you are really have to expand it like an accordion and realize that it also represents compromising life and all sentient beings.
Definitely. And I think, yeah.
I wanted to mention something, and I'll touch on a couple of things that you have mentioned as you were thinking, right?
Think out loud.
No, but it's like when we get spaces to speak about these things, Ghazali, and I know that you and I feel the same way about this, right? We have so much to say. We have so much that we have in our own spaces, in our quiet times. We spend a lot of time thinking for solutions for our people, right? We may have started as advocates for our own peoples, and eventually, the more you connect with others, that's why we end up becoming international human rights advocates, right? And all these other spheres, not just indigenous peoples, but also on treaties and other mechanisms, etc. Right? But the one thing that it's still in the works. I think we haven't reached our critical mass when it comes to our indigenous advocacy. So what we find ourselves experiencing many times is that we're fragmented into so many pieces, because everything is important, right? To me, the environmental violence that's happening, what's going to happen with the future generations, the mercury, the military waste in the island of Vieques, and all these things, that it will always be steep, right? And it doesn't mean that because we're advocates that we have to just go. And even though the path is steep, that we do not have a right to stop, to breathe, put the load down to the side, to do our quiet time, our own medicine, and as opposed to being a human doing, allowing ourselves to be a human being, right? And then you know what, brother? We pick up our bag again and we keep on climbing, right? So fragmentation has worked to the adversary's advantage because there are so many. We're being attacked from so many angles. I remember one sister from Borikén said to me, listen, there's so many protests right now that I don't know if I need to go to the one over there for our elderly or the one in the south for the ashes, or I need to go to Vieques and help those people. You know, like it's just tremendous, you know, and it gets to a point where it is exhausting. And I just urge everyone that it's okay to take a breather, you know? That it's okay to give yourself me time, because if you make little pauses of me time during your path, you know, during your journey, you don't need to stop the journey. You're just taking a breather. But it's when we let things just load and load and load and go, and you forget about the self, right? And many times we suffer from that, you know? I'm still learning on how to take care of me, right? Because if not, I would be doing this. I'm very self-didactic. I love studying. I will die studying or doing some research. But I also need to learn how to take time for myself. And you know, it's very easy. This is our passion. We understand our calling, you know, and we live for this. Like I said, you know, I'm a person with several disabilities, and this is where my aniki, right? And as Indigenous peoples, the mind, heart, and spirit are all one, right? Well, this is where my aniki, this is what gives me a force to continue, you know, because it could be very easy to just sit back and say, well, I have all these situations, medically, so I'm just going to sit here, enjoy my life, you know, but I find purpose in our advocacy, and I think it's important. Right. So I encourage everyone to know that it's okay to pause during your journey and to rest and to do, to just be, whatever that represents to you, whether it's meditating or going and connecting with nature, whatever that represents to each one. I think that is as necessary as the food that we take, right, to nourish our bodies. I think spirit needs that as well. The other thing that I wanted to say, Ghazali, you know, we have all these things. You're mentioning the chemicals, and you know, the U.S. continuing to do these things, producing these pesticides that are going to be used someplace else. And again, it goes back to the movie Circle of Poison. So I invite all your audience to check on YouTube. You know, I even the trailer, if you peek at the trailer, you'll get an idea, you know, and I know that in the US they charge, I don't know how it is in other countries, but needless to say, it is on YouTube, Circle of Poison. And it's it has subtitles in Spanish for those that are more comfortable with Spanish and will be able to understand it as well. And
what can people expect from Circle of Poison?
Well, you know, it really brings to light the consequences of what happens when you have country. And I want to make sure that we all understand the US is not the only one that does it. Okay? They can have a pesticide or a chemical, right? A pesticide in these cases, that is banned from use to the people here in the United States because of its toxicity, right? But remember, this is a capitalist nation, right? But they have made the arrangements so that loophole, if you want to call it like that. To me, there's no loopholes. To me, holes are left there on purpose. So there's these loopholes that say, well, you can continue producing it and you can sell it to somebody else, as long as you let them know that it's forbidden, it's banned in your country. It's not like you have to say, listen, your children can be born with many disabilities, malformations, chronic illnesses. It doesn't go into any of that. All they have to say is, Ghazali, here is this pesticide, right? But just know that I have it banned in my country. Or as the US, and I'm going to use the words that they insisted I use when I was in Geneva. They complained about the fact that I used the term, and me and Rochelle, that we use the term banned, right? And I had said to them, of course, you don't want me to say banned and want me to use, they demanded, and I had to do it, mind you. Yeah, that happens at the UN. And they made a complaint that they wanted Rochelle and I to not use the word banned or prohibited when we were speaking about these pesticides and these chemicals that were produced by the United States. That was a complaint, and right before our presentation, our side event, we were told you cannot use the word banned.
So they complained to the
state, the U.S. delegation, which Rochelle and I and an indigenous delegation confronted, right? We had a meeting set with them. Well, they didn't like the fact that, and this, I had that conversation across that table, right? Well, we don't have anything banned, said the head of the U.S. delegation. And I said, well, you don't want me to use, we prefer to use the word unregistered. And I said, well, it's a matter of semantics, because if I say banned, it gives people an alert. Hey, something is happening here. But if I just use the word unregistered, it says, well, they haven't registered it yet, but it doesn't infer a problem. It doesn't infer a warning. It doesn't infer, listen, you need to watch for this, right? So circle of poison allows us to see what the ramifications are to that, right? When these pesticides, by the time they make it to the farmer, right? And who do we have as farmers in Central and South America, for example? And the same thing happens in Asia, right? In India and all these other places, right? Usually it's indigenous peoples, or campesinos, whatever name they have come up to erase indigenous out of their denominators, right? And by the time it gets to Don Pepe doesn't know that is a very toxic pesticide. They may see the skull and bones, right? But you know what I used to see? What I used to think when I was a child and I growing up in a farm? That it just meant don't drink it. Don't put it in your mouth.
Yeah.
I didn't think that if you were spraying it, that was going to harm me, right? So by the time Don Pepe, many times, these people don't know how to read and write, right? So whatever instructions, and I'll give the example of the United States, right? Some of these things, by the time they make it to the farm, and mind you, I did a study on this, Ghazali. It's gonna sound like I'm exaggerating or making it up, but you can look it up. The label said in Spanish, if you do not know how to read English, ask somebody that knows. That is the label. Now, you think Don Pepe in the middle of acres of fields and plantations, do you think he's gonna look around and he's gonna see Jose, Maria, Junito, and they don't speak English. So what is that farmer going to do? They have to do their work, right? They don't know about equipment, and protective gear and any of these things.
And they don't have the money for that.
Of course.
Yeah.
And then talk about, when there is an apparent lack, right? Because I think indigenous peoples were very rich in a different way, right? It's just that based on the standards that we have been forced to live in,
right?
There's this illusion of lacking, right? And people reuse things. So these containers continue to be used, and maybe they put water, they collect water in these things, right? So circle of poison allows us to see the gravity of what happens with the exposure, unprotected exposure and lack of knowledge. Some communities are just sprayed, so forget it. It's not even that you don't know how to read English, you're being sprayed. And yet the very few make the connection of those illnesses that children are being born with. We have the case with our Yaqui relatives. The Yaqui peoples have been separated by international borders. So part of the Yaqui people are in the United States and the other part Mexico. And we know from La Abuelita that served as a witness, and testified at the UN in many different forms. And she was a midwife, and she started noticing that the children were they were jelly babies, right? Like the bone structure didn't seem like it was there, and stillbirths and all kinds of tragic events. The good thing and the result, and a great key here, is that communities that confront situations that have to do with damage by any of these elements need to take testimonies down. That is something empowering that they can do to help their communities, okay? And so I think it's of the essence. Circle of Poison will show how children that were being able to run and have a life like any child deserves, after their communities were sprayed, started developing illnesses that were very difficult. You see kids with their heads double or triple the size and inability to walk, or they become totally disabled, and including death. So why circle of poison? Because, for example, in the case of the US, when, they're making their money, right, on the sale of and the production of those pesticides, they sell them to developing countries usually. Guess what happens? Who does the US get their food from? Right? And then somebody may think, well, the USDA, or the FDA will check anything that comes into the United States, not understanding then 1% or less of the food that comes from other countries is inspected by these government agencies, right? Hence, making full circle. How do you know that those vegetables that you're eating that came from whatever country were not sprayed with these chemicals, right? And the tragedy, Ghazali, and I can tell you this, when I went to college for different things, right? Different times of my life, different things. But the first time I was majoring in clinical psychology. And at that time, 1 out of every 10,000 births was a child with autism, okay? 1 in 10,000. And it was pretty much, this is in the 80s, right? And it was pretty much the typical, like the movie Rain Man, right? With Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise, right? That typical case. Now we're talking about 1 and less than 63, you know, and I don't know the stats for the most recent times, right? So I'm talking maybe 2020 or 2019 stats. That's a big, huge significance. So what is happening? Like in my case, in my family, of all my grandchildren, I have a great deal of autism with my grandchildren. Now, I was raised on a farm. We were sprayed. We had military exercises above us, right? DDT was still being used when I was a child. Hey, they also experimented with Agent Orange all over my island. So which one is it? Why is it that we have so many cases, right, of autism in this younger generation? Right? So there's a lot of things that our people will not connect, Ghazali.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, again, in this particular example of now having your veggies on your American table, how do you know? So if your child or their child eventually, when they decide to have children of their own, how do you connect the fact that the U.S. sold that banned pesticide to whatever country in Central South America, and that it happened to be one of the ones that was not tested? You know, it was in that 99% that was not tested. And how do you know that your grandchild or your great-grandchild, how do you tie that condition? You know, malformation, you know, neurological conditions, all kinds of things. Yeah. How do you tie it to that? And people will never know. So it is important that we know how pesticides, how these chemicals, how is the process, right? We speak about the Stockholm Convention, right? This is the one that everybody decides, you know, well, it's so bad everywhere that, you know, we're gonna ban this chemical or whatever. The problem is the exceptions. The exceptions that many times, as I was saying, and you and I have experienced this in Geneva, and those meetings that we're not allowed to go in, right? Yeah. And then, yes, you know, when we hear, and now we're going to add this chemical to the Stockholm Convention's list of banned or restricted chemicals. But then you have industry. Remember that we're not the only ones. It's not just governments there, and indigenous peoples and interested parties, okay? You have infiltrated the corporations and the industries that are using those chemicals, and guess what? They're there to influence what maybe us as indigenous peoples cannot do, right? There's bigger interest. Many times these delegations come together, and then you may end up with an exception that could be, and the one that I always think about is an exception that is 100 years effective, right? So my grandchildren, Ghazali, even the little one that has one, will probably pass, because I don't know that our people are gonna live to 100. So that's beyond my grandchildren. Yeah. And that chemical will be staying, even though it was put on the list, but because industry negotiated an exception and the states agreed, now we're going to make that exception. And so in this case, let's say the airline industry can use this chemical in whatever part in their mechanics, right, for the next 100 years. After 100 years, you have to like stop it. Really?
Yeah.
We have exceptions like that.
You mentioned because what people need to know, it is not just crop dusting and everything else. It is actually way more than that.
Exactly.
It is the very phone that you use, your smartphone, and I've been to one of these super cops actually, because you have the Stockholm Convention, the Basel and then Rotterdam Convention, and they do super cop, meaning they all have one big event. They come together because it's all about chemicals and pesticides. They showed me child's toys, baby toys, and so there was they had this cubicle, and they showed me like, all right, let me test your phone. And with my phone was like they swapped something, and they showed me, yeah, well, this is all like chemicals. Like, all right. It was surprising, frightening, but then they showed this whole this toy that a baby plays with, and it was.
I saw the ducky. I'm telling you, Ghazali, I'm so glad that you bring this up, because a lot of people, sometimes you go into this here in the States, for example, you go to this dollar store, right? And you can smell certain chemicals and plastics, right?
Yeah.
And, not every single time things are tested. The parties that test things for real and that can give us good information are those that are doing independent studies, right? Because usually government allows the company that's producing the product to be the one doing the test and tell you that nothing will happen, right? And I remember that, and you see like the little soldiers, right? And I'm not saying that every dollar store, and to clarify this, because in the States, you know how things can like be blown out of proportion. I'm not saying that every single packet of toy soldiers and that every single packet of yellow duckies are necessarily made or have these chemicals. But I'm telling you, when I saw that ducky, my granddaughter Lily was less than a year old. I sent a message to my son right from the floor saying, if Lily has a yellow ducky, throw it out. At that point, I didn't care, Ghazali, if she had the good kind of yellow duckies, or I didn't want my granddaughter with that yellow ducky. Right. And it just made me think of, for example, IPEN had done a study, right? IPEN. IPEN. And it's pretty much based in Europe, and it has partners from different parts of the world, etc. And IPEN had done a study mostly in European countries, but they had gone and taken these toys, right, from different places. I believe that they had tested 26 countries, right, and randomly took these toys. Well, the 26 countries had toys that had these chemicals. And that is appalling. And I'm glad that you're, it's like you said, it's not just crop dusters, no, there's other things that are also impacting our lives that we don't even know.
Yeah. There was so I went to the Super Cup, I went to a side event, and there was this gentleman from a phone manufacturing company. I won't mention the name, otherwise I don't want to get sued.
You see, now we're having to do like that.
Yeah, but
disclaimers.
Disclaimer. Because I'm not going to mention that the phone company. However, it's a big phone company. Like they produce a very well-known one. And I was in a conversation with them, and I asked, well, because I showed them like, what, this is my phone, and they showed me like how many toxics are in it. And he said, well, we do have toxic free phones. I'm like, seriously? Yeah, we do. We have the ability to produce toxic free phones. So I'm like, well, you're at a super cop about this, about chemicals and toxics. And surely you see what's going on. Surely you see side events. You see indigenous peoples presenting all like their interventions and NGOs and everything else. So why don't you bring this to the market? And then and what he said was like so typical for a company, right? He said, yeah, the thing is, as soon as we put this toxic free phone on the market, then it will show that all our other phones are have toxics. So we would basically go out of business. So, you know, it is, just so people know, this super cop of the cop it's the weirdest meeting that I've ever been to. And you and we've been to a lot of meetings, and the one is weirder than the other one, but this one really is on top of the list. One, businesses get front row seats in a meeting, and indigenous peoples and NGOs, if they're lucky, all the way in the back, like way all the way in the back.
And after we wait like an hour, then we're asked to leave the room and the others stay, because I experienced that. We have been waiting for over an hour, and entire, you know, the few of us that were there, right? That most of were from the Alaska Community Action on Toxics, ACAT. And we're there and we have been waiting, you know, we're trying to be proper and sat in the back like they told us. And after we wait over an hour for that meeting, we were right when they were about to begin, we were asked to leave the room. So a lot of people don't even realize that, you know, this is some of the things that we encounter when we're really advocating for our own rights and for life itself.
Yeah. Also, what I found very weird, usually the UN, it is the countries make up, like they decide what's going on, and the chair facilitates the conversation. This one is the total opposite. No, the chair actually it bullies countries. Like so one country, I can't remember what it was. I think it was on this ban list or something that they were talking about a lot. And he said, no, well, done, dusted. No, and the country was like, no, we want to debate more about. No, it's done and dusted.
Yeah.
Gaveled and move on. And I was flabbergasted, because I was like, this is not how the UN usually works, because like the chairs do not bully states. Usually it is the other way around, you know, but it happens.
Ghazali, it was precisely at a COP with the chemical conventions, right? Where you know, everybody assumes UN diplomacy, you know, we have to be so proper and whatever, and, you know, go by the rules and have a protocol, you know, and the honorable this and the madam that and I actually saw people screaming their lungs out, you know, and I remember this delegate from an African country that was receiving, and the people, the meeting that I sacrificed this morning was precisely on this. We have to keep an eye on what kind of e-waste is coming to our lands. Okay, e-waste meaning like from computers or as Ghazali speaking about the phones. You think your phone is simple, and you know, if I throw it in the trash, it's not working anymore, I'm gonna put it in my trash, not realizing that you're harming the environment with the contents and the chemicals that have been used to create this instrument. And the worst part is that it lingers in the environment, right? Affecting, you know, soil, water, air, and everything else. And combining also with other chemicals already in the environment that could create other things. Needless to say, they were speaking about e-waste. And this African country had, obviously, it It was one of the countries that unfortunately gets bullied in these spaces. And the sending country was the Yeller and Screamer, and the African delegate was saying, but at least let us know what it is that you are dumping on our lands. And the other one was responding, I don't have to tell you anything because I don't have to.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is happening, and people don't realize that e-waste is going to be very critical in our communities, because all this e-waste, and I'll give you an example because it happens in Borikén. Usually when you think that you have a new phone, and again, I'm speaking from my experience from when I was in the island several years ago. You're thinking that you're buying a brand new phone. Well, many times you're buying a refurbished phone, right? I'm not saying that there's no new ones, but during that time, in the location of the main island that I was at, that new phone represented, hey, a nice looking refurbished phone in a new box, right? And I was so upset about it because I was like, they're sending it to the islands because that phone, guess where it's gonna die? It's going to die in my island, a place that they already use to dump a lot of things that our people don't even know about. So you see, e-waste is something that our peoples need to also be very vigilant, and again, education, Ghazali. All these things that we have spoken about amount to educating our people. Doing podcasts like this, opening an opportunity for people to ask questions, perhaps promoting more Zooms of Indigenous people so that we can update, and even like you said, touch subjects, such as self-determination, those things that our people need to understand so that they can defend them.
Why is this topic not as widely discussed, you think, chemicals, toxics?
Because of industry. See, a lot of times people think that the bullies are the countries, but and sometimes they forget that behind the countries, there's other interests that are manipulating the types of lives that you and I have, right? So there was a report that when Vicky Tauli-Corpus was the special rapporteur on the rights of Indigenous peoples and talking about trade, okay, I can't remember the name of the document, but it was on trade. And it was a long report, but it was an eye-opener for me, because there you saw, and I'll give you this example. Let's say that you have a country that that really cares about human rights, right? Now, because of whatever, they have allowed Company X to come to their country and do something near this indigenous community, right? So now we're saying, we know that the country cares about human rights, right? They're good peoples. And when they allowed this company to come and do their operations there, they didn't realize the impact that it would truly have. Now you get representatives from that indigenous community coming over to say, listen, our people are getting sick, some are dying, something is happening, or our water's being contaminated, right? And the country talks to the company and says, listen, Company Ghazali, we cannot continue doing this because I have a community with over 300 people there and they're getting sick by what you're dumping in their neighborhood, in their community. Now that multinational, that corporation can come and say, well, we already had an agreement, and if you do not fulfill my agreement, I'm going to sue you in such a way that your country will never have enough to pay me for my losses and all the things that I would have gained from having my operation there. So what does humble country that cares about human rights do? They're between the wall and the hard place, right? Because do I sacrifice those 300 people in that community to save my country from being sued? Or do I save the 300 and subject generations of people to pay a corporation because they sued us?
Yeah. I want to do more podcasts about this because I want to learn more. Would you? Yeah. Who should I talk to next? You think? Like, who should I?
I don't know if you've spoken with Rochelle.
Not yet, but I will if you. Yeah.
I would say because we're also having the Mercury conventions, and a lot of people are not aware of all the dangers that Mercury represents. I think it would be, if you want to expand on what we're doing, I think it would, to follow on that line, I think it would also be important to have Rochelle come over and speak about, you know, what Mercury does to our systems. We need to start educating our communities, and this information is not just what we do at the international arena. I don't pretend for anybody to become an expert and that they need to know all of these mechanisms, the ins and outs of whatever, but that they know that there are things that are in place, right? And that there are some of us that are working and have a little bit more expertise in those areas that perhaps we can also help educate. But I think it is of the essence that what little we know, we share.
Yeah.
You know, I think that in this conversation, we've touched on so many subjects that are so important. And I want to stress the fact that I think you are onto something with this Indigenous meeting or gathering every month to discuss something. I think that, you know, step by step is a great step.
Definitely. And I think that this conversation, like, I don't want to take too much of your time, but this conversation will be one of many, I think, because there are so many things that we should unpack and talk about. But
I want to, before we go,
that's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
That our relatives in all the different regions, the 7 social cultural regions of the world, particularly our sisters, observers, you know, private sector, whatever, still have time to register for the 2nd World Conference on Indigenous Women, right?
When is that?
It's going to, because we have to do it by Zoom,
online.
We're going to do it for 4 weeks straight, starting with Thursday, August 12th. And the final, you know, we'll meet every Thursday. We'll have a morning session and a night session to accommodate the time zones. So it doesn't mean that if you attended the morning session, for example, that you cannot attend the one at night. You know, right. I think it's important that we all hear what our other relatives from other regions have to say. And on September 2nd, you know, on the last one, everybody will make that sleep sacrifice that we were speaking about when we first started talking. Yeah. Right. And hopefully all the regions will be present for that final day on September 2nd. People can visit www.worldconferenceiw, meaning Indigenous Women, .org. And if it's an Indigenous woman, obviously sign up as that. We will have four languages. We have Russian, English, Spanish, and French. And registration will be open until August 10th. So please make sure that whether you have donors or you have organizations, even if they're not indigenous, but that are supportive of indigenous peoples, they can sign up as observers, right? But indigenous women will have the priority of speaking during these sessions. So that is something that it's really important. I hope that that this has given a little glimpse of the things that we do, right? And that one of the main things is to remain humble. I think that every single one of us in the morning, the second we get up, right, we have Mr. Ego waiting there, right? And we may think that because we do things at a larger scale or visibility, that we are the sun and the sun revolves around us. And it's not that way. It takes a lot of hard work, sacrifice, commitment, and a great need of self-care, because many of us do not do that job very well when it comes to us taking care of us. We can take care and defend many, but it is something that we're learning. And I hope that, you know, that you and I, Ghazali, with our experiences and this conversation, have shared some seeds with our relatives that are listening. And it is my hope, right? There's only 3 things that you can do with the seed. It makes some sense, but I'm not ready to plant it yet. So you put it in the pocket, or it doesn't make any sense and you toss it, or you say, I received a seed, but I know it's going to give me fruit. It makes sense to me to plant it right now.
Right.
So that's what we can do.
No, Tai, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for doing this, for one. And like I said, we'll definitely going to talk more about not only about toxics and everything else, but also about everything else. But thank you so much for your time, Tai, and have a great continuation of your day. Oh, evening. Sorry. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Ghazali. Abundant blessings to everybody. And if you hear some background, these are Zoom times in family environments. So
we are all experienced in this. We all used to this. So yeah.
So Seneca Kakona, abundant blessings to you, my dear.